Welcome to DISCflex Report walkthrough for summary and scores page.
So our first personalized page for DISCflex is going to be the summary and scores page. This is going to give you the 30,000 foot view of someone's behavior. You should be able to go in right here at the top and say, okay, I kind of know who I'm going to be dealing with right off the DISCflex pattern. Susan Sample, who we're talking about here today, is an elevated dominance pattern. She's strong-willed, self-motivated, and determined in her actions. She likes to be in a leadership role and will typically take charge and make decisions very quickly. That is based specifically off of an overall pattern, which is going to be score dependent on whether you have one elevated factor, two elevated factors, or even all the way to where all of them are flat across because they're within a certain range of each other. That's the very high level view. If you want the more detailed view, you come to these next two, where we can see that she is 80 dominance, 46 influence, 43 steadiness, and 43 compliance. So the rest of them are all pretty close together here, but that dominance really pops for Susan Sample. Each of these DISC factors are scored from 0 to 100 independently. So there's no perfect score you will get. If you added all these up for each person, it is going to change from person to person what their total score is. But when you take that, total it up and divide it by their score, or divide their score by the total, you'll get the percent to totals, which is going to be the pie chart. So that's the picture of the whole, where we pull everything together and figure out, exactly who are we dealing with here. As I said, from 0 to 100 for each of the 4 DISC factors here, we actually grade them into quadrants for the system. So 0 to 25 would be considered a low score. Medium low would be 26 to 50. 50 to 75 would be a medium high. And then 76 and above would be considered a high score. The reason I mention that is our report does not look at this elevated dominance pattern and say, okay, this person's a high D, here's the high D report. Ours is very customized, very dialed in to each of these factors independently. So our system actually reads this as high dominance, mid-low influence, mid-low steadiness, mid-low compliance. So in certain paragraphs throughout the report or certain pieces throughout the report, it's going to pull in specific information based on which quadrant the person scored in. So there's basically no difference between having a 46 score and a 36 score as far as the system's concerned, but it tells us where that person is within the range. And that's what information will come. And the way that I score those, if you all wrote those down from the 0 to 25, that's that low score. That's basically someone telling you never in the assessment. So throughout that assessment process, for them to score under a 25, they're going to pretty much have to disagree with everything to do with that factor. So that would be kind of the never range, as I call it. 26 to 50 range, that's going to be the sometimes range. So I sometimes display those behaviors. So mid-high is going to be usually, right? And then that high quadrant is going to be always. So if I look at this as a coach and say, okay, this person always uses their dominance factor and sometimes uses these other factors. So we need to probably dial back and dial down and work on bringing that down for dominance. And then for these other 3 factors, we're going to work on bringing those up. So then looking at the pie chart, as I said, this is a percent to total. So that 80, so that would be 38% of this person's behavior. When you add it all together. And the reason that our reports dial into a lot more than just, oh, hey, you're elevated dominance, here's the dominance profile, is because overall that dominance is really only, almost 40% of this person's behavior. So we would be completely ignoring this other 60%, which is just not wise because there's a lot more to this person than just dominance. So when we look at the factor pairings, this is something that's important. It will be on the test as well. But factor pairings can be viewed on the very last page, or in the last 3 pages, I'm sorry, of the report. It's the first of 3 quick reference guides. It'll look like this. This is page 27 of 29. And dominance influence together measure extroverted behaviors. compliance, steadiness together, introverted, influence, steadiness, people-oriented, dominance, compliance, task-oriented. So depending which discs you've used in the past, same type of thing as a lot of the others. But we don't specifically put that into the report. We leave that as a built-in easy thing for our coaches to be able to use and look at somebody and come to this report right now to this person I've never met before and say, oh, hi, Susan, it's very nice to meet you. Based on the scores I can see, it looks like you're a little bit on the you're on the extroverted side over the introverted side. So you do prefer extroversion and being talkative, and you seem to lean more towards tasks than how something's going to impact your team or something like that. So you're going to go task first, get stuff finished, then go to the people side and check on people and see if they've caught up or have what they need to be able to perform their duties, things like that. So again, we've got extrovert, introvert, people orientation, and task orientation. You can further break those down, as I'm sure some of you have done in the past with DISC. But like I always talk to everyone about dominance, compliance together. Those are task-oriented traits, both of them, but they're separated back out by how they accomplish the task. So when we talk about climbing a mountain, that's my favorite analogy for D and C together, is there's a peak that we're all trying to get to, and we have the dominance people who are going to take off running towards that peak and carve their way as they go, figure it out, step in a hole, turn around, readjust the plan, and they're going to just keep heading to the top of that mountain. You have your compliance people who are going to sit there, look at the map, pick the best way to go, be smart, have the tools ready to go, and it's going to take them a little bit longer to launch and get started. And you can have a tortoise versus the hare situation kind of thing in here. With that said, if the challenge is very simple, if the road to victory is short, the dominance is going to win this race. And the dominance can wind up frustrated with the compliance people because they're saying, hey, come on, let's just do this. Now, also within every team, you have that dominance person who's doing that, and you get to a treacherous path and they fall down into a cave or something they can't get out of because they don't know what they don't know what they're up against and hauling forward. You need those compliance people that are going to come, that are going to pull the rope off their back and pull you out of the pit that you've fallen in or any of those things. So it's very important to have both on each team. And that's one of the things we really look for in our team reports is, hey, are we missing one of these types of people on our team? Same thing on the people versus task, or on the people side. You can break down the people orientation into two groups as well. You have the people like myself who are very high eyes, who will go to the party and talk to the person that I've seen the least, that I just met, talk to people outside of my circle, because it's like, oh, I don't see these people. And here in the States, we have Olive Garden. I'm not sure if you guys have Olive Garden or not. I know they're worldwide, but they have it's a restaurant, and their phrase is, if you're here, you're family. So I call the Olive Garden trait. It's literally, you'll walk out, you're just like, oh, hey, this person's near me, I'll talk to them. The person that's easy to trap at the water cooler, all those things. Now the S, on the other hand, they're very people driven as well, but they do it in a more introverted way, and they do it in smaller groups that they're more comfortable with. My wife would be an example of a people-oriented person who's more steady. So we go to a party, she's with the group we showed up with or we plan to go with. She's quiet. She's, being around the people that she's most comfortable with, while I'm off walking around talking to, whoever will talk to me, kind of thing. The further over 50% that two factors take of your pie chart, the more likely you are to display those behaviors.
Question from my side. In speaking just now, you made the comment that, in this example, Susan is this type of person. Mm-hmm. Now, something that I've experienced, I've been introduced to DISC many, many years ago when we were saying those kind of things quite easily. But in more recent years, I found that people were trying to say that the DISC profile doesn't mean that you are that kind of person. It just means that that's your behavioral profile in a particular situation. How do
Correct.
you know, is this a personality type or is it a behavioral style?
It is a behavioral style. And that's where the flex, I should have mentioned it then. But with the flex, these are all behavioral preferences that we're speaking to, and that all of them can be changed. Whereas you can leave from work or wherever it is that you're practicing this and go right back to who you are as a person. We're not trying to change personality. We are being descriptive on your behavior specifically. So when I say extroverted, that's more of you told us in this assessment, you prefer the extroverted traits over the introverted traits.
Yeah. Okay.
And you're more comfortable with that behavior. Thank you for that. The next section, the strengths and potential challenges, this is the first place that we are going to use the quadrants that I explained before, how each quadrant is going to pull different results. So if you look at your DISC results and you are an elevated dominance person, you could still have different strengths than this person, because this one goes one from dominance, one from influence, one from steadiness, one from compliance in order, and the strength pulls from which quadrant you're in. So this 80 dominance score pulls that this person is determined. So it's always in order DISC. I'm going to pull up I will pull up the PowerPoint here in a minute and show you that as well. But dominance 80 tells us that they are determined. 46 influence tells us that they are self-governing. 43 steadiness tells us that they're able to be straightforward. 43 compliance tells us that they are pioneering. They're not stuck in the box. The potential challenges box works differently. What this box does is it looks at your pattern and says elevated dominance and basically lower influence, steadiness, compliance. It does not take into account the exact scores for this box, but it says dominance over these others. Here are some things that you should watch out for when your dominance gets above the others. Or in Di, in your case, steadiness, influence, steadiness, I think you said, elevated influence, steadiness. What happens if you forget about that dominance, compliance? And that box of potential challenges will give us information about, how is this person going to behave under stress? For elevated dominance people, focus, that's a big one. Giving up control, prioritization, and deciding too quickly. Those are pitfalls that anyone with that elevated dominance can easily fall into. When we are coaching to this box, I always explain to people that, hey, listen, this is based off of your factor and the highest level view. So these are things that hopefully you have learned to curb at least one or two of these to be able to flex those behaviors. So for instance, one of my biggest ones on there is organization. Now, my method of organization is not quite up to standards, not even close to any of you with the elevated compliance still, but I have learned to flex that. It's not as big of a challenge for me as it once was. So if it just popped up on me today, I'd be like, well, I'm pretty good at that. So just know that there's going to be one that hopefully they've already learned to flex. Two, maybe a second one that they're like, hey, I'm working on this. But this is just a box that, look at this. These are things that you could improve on and try not to fall into this trap when you are stressed. So that's the page that, as we just did, that when I'm dealing with a client directly, that we're going to spend the most time on. That's where you can go in and really set the foundation of here's where we are today. We've just taken that look in the mirror. And from here, we can start to adjust your behavior.